Moving to a new town as a teenager was supposed to be a fresh start, a clean slate. I was 16 when my parents uprooted our lives and dragged me across the country to this small, quiet city where everyone already knew each other. I hated it, at first. Then I met Lena. She wasn't like the other girls. She didn't throw herself at me when I walked into school, didn't giggle at my jokes just because I was new. She had this quiet confidence, this way of looking at you like she was already 2 steps ahead in the conversation. I liked that, and I liked her. But I wasn't the only one. There was always him, Jake, Lena's best friend since childhood. The guy who knew everything about her, the way she liked her coffee, the songs she played on repeat, the little scar on her knee from when she fell off her bike at 6 years old. I should have hated him, but I didn't. Because I knew, deep down, I was better, I was faster, stronger, smarter. I was the one winning trophies, leading the school, making plans for the future. And Lena? She was with me. She always chose me. Jake could make her laugh, sure. He could be her comfort zone, but I was her future, at least. That's what I thought. We graduated, went to college together, got married. Everything fell into place like it was, supposed to. Like I had planned. Except for one thing, kids. We tried, and tried, and tried. Years passed, and nothing. We saw doctors, took tests, heard the same answers. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. Lena stopped smiling when she talked about the future. I pretended not to notice. And then, finally, it happened. She was pregnant. I remember sitting in the doctor's office holding her hand, staring at the ultrasound screen like I had just won the biggest game of my life. Except this wasn't a game. This was real. For the first time, I felt it, this overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful thing. I was going to be a father. Then, just as fast, it was gone. Lena lost the baby. I remember the look on her face when she told me. Empty, quiet, like she had already gone somewhere else. I didn't know what to say. I had spent my entire life being the guy with answers, the guy who fixed things, the guy who won, but there was nothing to fix, no way to win. She told me she needed space, so I gave it to her. She started leaving the house more. Long walks, hours at a time. I told myself it was normal, that she needed air, time to grieve. Then one afternoon, I decided to do something nice, something small. I went to her favorite cafe, ordered her favorite coffee, picked up the dessert she always loved. I was on my way home when I saw her. She was in the park, sitting on a bench, and she wasn't alone. Jake was there. His hand was on her back. She was leaning into him, her head low, her shoulders shaking. He was whispering something to her. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I forced myself to breathe. This isn't what it looks like. She's grieving. He's a friend. That's all. Right? I waited until she came home. She walked in, set her purse down, barely looked at me. "Where were you?" I asked. She paused, then frowned. "What do you mean?" I kept my voice calm. Too calm. "I saw you. In the park." Something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt, not even surprise. Just annoyance. She sighed. "I just needed air. I ran into Jake. We talked." She shrugged. "That's all." I wanted to believe her. She walked past me, heading for the bedroom. Over her shoulder, she added, "I needed someone to talk to. Not you." She didn't say it out loud. She didn't have to. Told myself it was fine. It was natural. She was grieving, and he was a friend. Nothing more. But then things started to change. She started going out more, taking long walks, running even. She never ran before. She said it cleared her head, that it helped. And then, one night. She came home later than usual. I was sitting on the couch when she walked in. She looked startled, like she hadn't expected me to still be awake. "Hey," she said, pulling off her jacket. "You were gone a while." She hesitated. "Just a second." "Yeah, Lost track of time at the gym. The gym. That was new. I nodded, watching her. She seemed different, relaxed almost, but something in her voice felt off, forced. I let it go, for now. But that night when she climbed into bed, she smelled like something unfamiliar. Not sweat, not exhaustion, like cologne. The room felt colder than before. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something inside me knew. This wasn't grief anymore. It was something else. And once you feel that shift, once that doubt creeps in, you can never unfeel it. It stays, it lingers, and it waits. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was overthinking things. She had been through something terrible. We both had. She just needed space. That's what I kept telling myself. But space turned into distance. She started coming home later. Her morning runs stretched longer. Her phone was always with her. I caught her smiling at it once, just for a second, before she noticed me watching, and quickly put it down. One night, I decided to ask. Not accuse, not push, just ask. Who were you texting? She looked up from the couch, blinking like she hadn't expected the question. What? Just now. You were smiling at your phone. Oh. She glanced at it, like she'd forgotten it was still in her hand. It was just Jake. There it was again. His name. Always there, lingering between us like a shadow. Something funny? I kept my voice even. She hesitated, then gave me a small smile. Just something stupid, an inside joke. I wanted to ask what it was. I wanted to see if she'd tell me, if she'd laugh and show me the message. But she didn't. She just set her phone down on the coffee table, face down, and went back to watching TV. I nodded, even though she wasn't looking. Right, I went to bed before she did that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint buzz of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. I didn't ask again. I started noticing more things. Small things. The way she'd glance at her phone and quickly put it away when I walked into the room. The way she never invited Jake over anymore, even though they had always been close. The way she started wearing perfume when she went out, even if it was just for a run. I wasn't stupid. I knew what these things usually meant. But this was Lena, my wife. She wouldn't do that to me. Would she? One evening, she came home late again. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read emails on my laptop when she walked in. She was in her workout clothes, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Hey, she said, setting her keys down. I checked the time on my screen. You were out late. She hesitated for just a second. Yeah, the gym was crowded. I closed my laptop. Which gym? She frowned. What? Which gym do you go to? She stared at me, and I could see her brain working, trying to decide if the question was innocent or something more. The one on 5th. I nodded, pretending to accept the answer. The next day, I drove past the gym on 5th. Her car wasn't there. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, waiting, watching. She never showed up. That night, I didn't say anything. I waited. I wanted to see if she'd lie again. She did. When she came home, I asked how her workout was. Good, she said, pulling off her jacket. Tiring. I watched her carefully. Was it crowded? She nodded. Yeah. Could barely get time on the treadmill. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to smile. Yeah? Sounds like a pain. She just shrugged, then walked past me into the bedroom. I stared at the spot where she had been standing, feeling something cold settle in my chest. She was lying to me. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, my heart pounding with something I couldn't quite name. Fear? Anger? I told myself I needed proof. Real proof. The next day, I left work early. Drove around for a while, trying to clear my head. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Then I saw her car. It wasn't near the gym. It was parked outside a quiet little coffee shop on the other side of town. A place we had never been to together. I pulled over across the street and waited. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. She stepped out. She wasn't alone. Jake walked beside her. They were talking, their heads close together. She was laughing at something he said. My stomach twisted. I watched as they walked toward her car. He reached for her arm just for a second, but the touch lingered. She didn't pull away. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. This wasn't grief. This wasn't friendship. This was something else. I forced myself to breathe. I didn't storm out of the car. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I drove home. That night, when she came back, I didn't ask where she had been. I didn't tell her what I had seen, but something inside me had shifted. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The doubt was gone. I knew. And soon, she was going. To know that I knew, I spent the next few days pretending everything was fine. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, sent her texts during the day, asked how her workouts were going. She kept lying, kept smiling, kept looking me in the eye and telling me things that weren't true. It was almost impressive, but the problem with lies is that they don't just sit still. They grow, stretch, twist into something bigger until they can't be controlled anymore, and hers were starting to unravel. One evening she was in the shower when her phone lit up on the nightstand. Shouldn't have looked. I tell myself that even now, even after everything, but I did. It wasn't a long message. Just one line. Jake, I can't stop thinking about earlier. Call me when you can. Earlier. What happened earlier? What exactly couldn't he stop thinking about? I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. I just stared at the screen, at those words, and felt something snap inside me. She came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, hair wrapped in a towel, humming to herself like nothing in the world was wrong. Like she wasn't balancing on the edge of destroying our life together. I watched her. She noticed. "What?" she asked, still smiling. I shook my head. "Nothing." Nothing. That's what I told myself, too. The next day, I left work early. I parked a few streets down from our house and waited. It didn't take long. She left around the same time she always did. Said she was going for a run. I followed her. Not close enough for her to notice, but close enough to see the truth. She didn't go to the gym, didn't go to the park. She went to him. I watched from my car as she knocked on the door. As he opened it, smiled, pulled her inside. I sat there for a long time. Longer than I should have. Then I drove home. That night, I waited for her to lie. To me again she did. Said she had a great run. Said she felt better. She kissed me goodnight, and I let her. Because I wasn't ready yet. But soon, she wouldn't be able to lie anymore. The next day I told her I had to work late. Made sure. She believed it. Then I went back to Jake's house. I waited, and when she showed up again, I was ready. She knocked. He let her in. I gave it a few minutes, then I got out of my car and walked to the door. I didn't knock. I turned the handle. It wasn't locked. I stepped inside, and what I saw changed everything. She wasn't undressed. She wasn't kissing him. She was sitting on the couch, leaning forward, her hands gripping her knees like she was trying to stop herself from falling apart. And Jake was just sitting there, watching her. Not touching. Not speaking. Just watching. She looked up when she heard me. Her face went pale. I expected her to jump up, to start apologizing, to try to explain. She didn't. She just stared at me, frozen. I stepped forward, my hands curling into fists. "So, this is it?" My voice was too calm. It didn't match the storm inside me. Jake stood up, raising his hands like I was a wild animal he needed to calm down. "Man, listen." "No." I pointed at him. "You don't get to talk. Not now. Not after everything." Lena swallowed hard. How did I know?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Because you're not as careful as you think, Lena." She looked away. I turned back to Jake. You've been waiting for this, haven't you, since high school? Since the day I met her. His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it, and that was the worst part. Lena stood up. I never wanted to hurt you. I turned to her. Then why? She took a shaky breath. Because I love him. The words hit me harder than a punch ever could. I waited for the pain, for the anger, for the explosion. It didn't come. I just felt tired. I ran a hand through my hair. So what now? You leave? You run off into the sunset together? She didn't answer. Jake stepped forward. I didn't plan this, man. I laughed, shaking my head. Bullshit. He sighed, looking down. Okay, maybe I did. Maybe I always knew she was supposed to be with me. Lena flinched. Jake, no, let him talk. I cut in. Let him say it. Jake met my eyes. She loves me. She always has. I clenched my jaw. Then why the hell did she marry me? Lena inhaled, sharply. Because I thought I could love you more. I stared at her. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. A silent claim, and she let him. I nodded slowly. Okay, Lena frowned. What do you mean? I mean, okay. I stepped back, glancing at Jake. You win, he blinked. What? I turned to Lena one last time. I hope he was worth it. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. Didn't yell. Didn't look back. Because there was nothing left to see. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember unlocking the door to our house, the house that didn't feel like mine anymore. Just stood there, in the middle of the living room, staring at nothing. I should have felt anger, rage, betrayal, but all I felt was empty, because the truth was, I had lost her a long time ago. I had just been too blind to see it. I sat on the couch, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together like I was praying. Maybe I was. Maybe I was hoping that if I sat still long enough, I would wake up and none of this would be real. But it was. And then the door opened. Lena. She stepped inside hesitantly, like she wasn't sure she belonged here anymore. Maybe she didn't. She didn't look guilty. She just stood there holding her keys like she didn't know where to start. I didn't say anything. She took a deep breath. We need to talk. I shook my head. We really don't. A pause. Then, quietly, I never meant to hurt you. I laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was the last lie she would ever tell me. I looked up at her. Do you love him? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaled, and then nodded. Yes. Just like that. No hesitation, no apology, no regret. I nodded slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. Okay, Lena swallowed. What happens now? I stood up, grabbing my jacket from the chair. You tell me. She hesitated. I don't know. I stared at her. Yeah, I think you do. She looked down at her hands. I need time. Exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Time for what? To decide if you're actually going to leave me? Her silence was answer enough. I walked past her, stopping at the door. I didn't look back when I said it, but I know she heard me. I hope you finally got what you wanted. And then I left. I didn't take anything with me, because there was nothing left to take. The hotel room smelled like stale air and cheap soap. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, the city lights flickering through the curtains. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't punch the wall. I just sat there, the weight of everything pressing down on me, crushing, suffocating, and still, nothing. I waited for the pain to hit, for the reality to sink in. It didn't, because deep down I had already known. Maybe I had always known, I just didn't want to believe it. Days passed in a blur. Lena sent a few texts, short ones. Checking in. I didn't respond. Then, one evening, she called. I stared at my phone, watching it vibrate against the nightstand. I let it ring, and when it stopped, I turned it off. Weeks went by. I signed the papers when they arrived. Didn't ask questions. Didn't fight. I just signed my name and sent them back. And that was it. That was how a marriage ended. Not in a fiery explosion. Not in a dramatic showdown. Just in silence. A month later, I saw them together. I was walking downtown, hands in my pockets, lost in thought, and then there they were. Jake was holding her hand. She was smiling at him, that soft, familiar smile, the kind she used to give me. They hadn't seen me. I could have turned around, walked the other way, but I didn't. I watched them, and for the first time, I felt it. Not anger, not jealousy, not regret, relief. Because I didn't want her back. I didn't want this back. She had made her choice, and finally, I was making mine. I turned away and kept walking, not looking back. Not this time. Not ever again.